The white sturgeon is the largest freshwater fish in North America, an ancient, bottom-dwelling fish that can live for over 100 years and can grow to over 20 feet in length. Technically, they are classified as bony fish but actually have more cartilage than bone and thus resemble sharks. They live in rivers and bays in both fresh and salt water along the northwest coast of North America. They have an excellent sense of smell and feed primarily on dead fish and other floating material. They also occasionally eat crustaceans. They have catfish-like whiskers and can sense food sources both in the water and in the mud. Although they don't look like it, white sturgeon often jump when hooked. It's a spectacular sight. Sometimes they also jump freely, for reasons I don't know. Most of the time they sit near the bottom and wait for food to pass by. White sturgeon are vulnerable to overfishing. As a result, there are strict size and population limits in most places where they live. They are delicious to eat and their eggs are used to make caviar. When young, they have sharp scales along their bodies, but as they get older these wear down and are less likely to cut you. They have no teeth and are relatively easy to handle when brought into a boat if they get tired. White sturgeon are probably not really that strong for their size, but they are so large that I have raised their rating a bit because the big ones can be quite a fight. They almost always get caught on bait, and are therefore usually very firmly hooked, which is good because they often jump up and try to shake the hook off. They are not really geared towards hiding. You will want to use a fairly sturdy tackle to pull heavy fish up into the current. They don't really bite bait, so you can use a heavier, more durable rod instead of a lighter graphite one since you won't be casting all day. Braided line is recommended to help get the hook into their fat mouths. If fishing for large fish, 80 pounds braid is fine. Their eyesight is pretty poor, so you can use a very heavy leader. You'll generally need a fairly heavy weight to keep the bait on the bottom where they feed. The exact size will depend on the current. Scroll down to the bottom of the page for some links to fishing gear for these. White sturgeon are almost always caught with bait rather than lures. They will occasionally bite trout baits that are in the current, but generally only if they smell like herring or some other bait fish is clinging. I don't know of any way to consistently catch them with artificial bait. White sturgeon are not particularly picky about bait. Squid, shad, herring, salmon, rainbow trout, if allowed, and other dead fish will work. For larger fish, you should use large baits. When the herring are running, a 2-pound shad will be a great bait for large white sturgeon. Just make sure your bait is on the bottom. White sturgeon tend to bite very lightly, especially on fish this large. They can bite for quite a while without eating, and will often drop the bait if they feel resistance. When you see a small bite, hold the rod and wait until you feel a stronger pull. Then set the hook as hard as possible, preferably more than once, and reel in quickly. As mentioned earlier, sturgeon often jump when hooked. The Pacific Northwest is a good area for white sturgeon, especially in the Columbia River in Oregon near Bonneville Dam. Lake sturgeon is Minnesota's largest fish, and oh, what a fish! They can grow to over 100 pounds. Plus, big sturgeon are becoming more common in Minnesota. For example, the Rainy River has nearly 100,000 sturgeon measuring 40 inches or longer. That's more than 60 miles from tip to tail. If you've never fished for lake sturgeon, now is the time to try it. Sturgeon fishing has been the best since the late 1800s. Season dates for sturgeon vary depending on whether you're fishing inland waters or waters that border another state or Canada. Check fishing regulations based on where you want to fish. Some waters have special regulations for sturgeon. That being said, the state's most popular sturgeon fishing destinations are Lake of the Woods and Rainy River, which have both catch and release seasons and harvest seasons where you can keep one fish per calendar year. The harvest season runs from late April to early May and early July to late September. The catch and release season runs from early May to mid-May and early October to late April. This means that from the second half of May to the end of June, you can't fish for sturgeon. The rest of the year, you can fish for sturgeon. Sturgeon fishing is pretty simple. Simple because all you do is basically drop live bait to the bottom and wait for the fish to bite. A typical sturgeon fishing set starts with a sturdy muskalunge rod. Add a crosswind reel loaded with braid in the 80 to 100 pound test range. Next, thread your line through a heavy-duty slide sinker. Many sturgeon anglers prefer no-roll slide sinker in the 1 to 5 ounce range. Use just enough weight to keep your bait on the bottom. Once you have threaded your line through the sinker, tie a sturdy barrel swivel to the line. This will keep the sinker from sliding down onto the hook. Next, tie about 12 to 18 inches of line to the other end of the barrel swivel. This is your leader line. Finally, tie a 5/0 circle hook to the other end of the leader line. Now you are ready. Most anglers fish with one or more earthworms on the hook, and many also like to add a bait fish or two for extra security. When you feel a bite, simply tighten the line and lift the rod, allowing the circle hook to catch. Then hold on tight. You may have to fight a fish for 10 minutes or more. A sturdy rod with heavy line is best because it allows you to reel in the fish faster, which means less stress for the fish. Typically, people fishing for sturgeon from a boat will look for deeper pools or seams in the river bottom. They then anchor slightly above these areas and let their bait settle in. They do this because the sturgeon often cage, and when they start moving upstream, they often leave by swimming upstream from the top of the pool. The lake sturgeon is a primitive fish with a torpedo-like shape and a cartilaginous skeleton. Its body has 5 rows of large, prominent bony plates called scales. The lake sturgeon has a flat snout, large, fleshy barbels, and a protruding mouth located below the head. The lake sturgeon prefers large, clear lakes and rivers. They are usually found on sandy, gravelly, or compact bottoms. The lake sturgeon is migratory, occurring in all Minnesota drainages except Missouri. The lake sturgeon travels widely. They need large areas of shallow water to forage, gently dragging their barbels along the bottom in search of prey. Their diet includes insect larvae and other invertebrates, snails, leeches, small clams, and small fish. Reproduction occurs from April to early June. Females lay eggs once every 4 to 6 years and usually reach sexual maturity at 24 to 26 years of age. Males lay eggs every 2 to 3 years and typically reach sexual maturity at 8 to 17 years of age. The maximum lifespan of lake sturgeon is typically 55 years for males and can be over 150 years for females. Sturgeon meat has a very unique texture. Unlike other fish meats, sturgeon meat is very dense. It is comparable to a tender, pasture-raised pork chop. Like pork, sturgeon is best cooked slowly, as it will stretch when exposed to direct heat. Therefore, do not pan fry or broil a fillet or steak, thick, without first baking for 20 to 30 minutes, covered, at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. For a more tender sturgeon, like a pork loin, bake for a longer time at a lower temperature. A drizzle of white wine and lemon juice before baking will produce good results. If cut into 3/4 pieces or thin strips, breaded sturgeon can be pan-fried and served as a delicacy without baking first. Do not pan-fry or pan-fry large or thick pieces without baking first. The texture can be a bit chewy or tough. Sturgeon meat is extremely versatile. It easily absorbs almost any flavor. Flavors range from simple and pure with a little salt, pepper and butter, to spicy curry or barbecue flavors. Sturgeon is a great healthy substitute in chicken and pork recipes.